And now I have the pleasure of introducing today's presenters, Douglas Fisher and Nancy Frey, who can really relate to what you all have been going through the past 2 years as they continue to see and feel very similar struggles and joys that you all do. Doug is a professor in educational leadership at San Diego State University and a leader at Health Sciences High and Middle College. He has served as a teacher, language development specialist, and administrator in public schools and nonprofit organizations, including 8 years as the director of professional development for the City Heights Collaborative, a time of increased student achievement in some of San Diego's urban schools. Doug has published numerous books, including the Success Criteria Playbook, the PLC Plus series, and Leading the Rebound. Nancy is also a professor in educational leadership at San Diego State University and a leader at Health Sciences High and Middle College. She's been a special education teacher, reading specialist, and administrator in public schools. Nancy has engaged in professional learning communities for several decades, building teams that design and implement systems to impact teaching and learning. She's published numerous books, including the Teacher Clarity Playbook, Comprehension, and How Tutoring Works. Now I will turn it over to get us started, and Nancy, feel free to take it away.
I don't think that Doug and I can start without saying, once again, we are so grateful for what it is that all of you do as caring educators. And while we're at a time in many places where some of the masking requirements may be changing or about to change sometime in the near future, we ourselves cannot mask our gratitude. Sorry for the little pun there, but in truth, we are so grateful for what it is that you do to take care of children, of young people, of families, of communities, of colleagues, and especially we want to make sure that you're taking care of yourself as well. These are all key and fundamental to being able to persevere in 2022.
If you haven't heard the news, read the news in the last couple of weeks, somewhere about 1 million educators have left this profession, not changed their schools. I mean, literally left this profession. And when we talk to them about why, and you read the reports on why they're leaving, it's all about not having an impact, not thinking that their efforts are making a difference. And it's demoralizing, it is frustrating, and it's leading to burnout and turnover. And the first thing we want to talk about is around teacher agency. And how do we maintain the sense, this understanding that what we do, what we are doing has made an impact on the lives of our students. This current school year was supposed to be so much better than remote and distance learning. But it doesn't seem that that's the case. We have lots of quarantines, we have revolving doors, we have all these mandates that are confusing and changing. And this current school year seems to have destabilized a lot of educators. And their beliefs are not the same as they were back in 2009. And I think about this, if I think back a few years, I think most educators said, when I do something, great things happen for my learners. When I plan a lesson, when I design a learning experience, great things happen in our minds. We're like, we got it. We know we're having an impact. We understand that when we do these things, great things happen. This school year, I keep hearing phrases like, we're drowning. It's not getting better. I don't know how to catch up my students. I don't know how to reach all of my students. And there's not enough people. And people are covering each other's classrooms because there are no subs. And what's starting to happen are people saying, are my efforts resulting in anything that matters? Is anything I'm doing making a difference? That's your agency. And if we start to see people, students, educators, saying, I'm not making a difference anymore. I don't think my efforts are making any impact. Well, the logic is, if my efforts are not making a difference or an impact, I'm going to put forth less effort. And as I put forth less effort, I get less impact. And it's a cycle that starts to be created that results in demoralized teaching. And there is a moral reward to the teaching profession. Yes, there's financial rewards, but there are moral rewards. And the moral rewards include watching students learn and having great relationships with young people. That feels good to us. That's this moral reward. And if that's getting compromised, we're running the risk of people leaving. So we've been doing some work on teacher agency, educator agency, because leaders are having the same kinds of thing. And there are a few areas that shape and reshape educator agency. The first is feedback. And there are well-intended, well-meaning districts that have cut out feedback to teachers, trying to save them time and stress. We thrive on feedback from people we value, our peers, coaches, leaders. We thrive on this. And part of that agency is when someone else recognizes and gives me feedback that that was effective, that worked. It seemed to accelerate learning. So we want to make sure people are getting feedback. They know that their efforts are making a difference. The second thing is around collaboration. And again, well-intended, well-meaning districts have cut out PLC time, grade level collaboration time, professional learning time, and they're trying to take things metaphorically off the teacher's plate or off the principal's plate. The problem with that is one thing that shapes our agency is when we get to tell our stories and talk about our practices. And that's exciting when we get to have these conversations with colleagues. It builds our agency. And the third is around having success. When you experience success and you realize that you've had an impact, it's very powerful. So what we need to do, what we should be doing, is harvesting wins, the power of these small wins, and attributing success to the person who put forth the effort. And if we could do this for each other, since we don't seem to be doing it a lot for ourselves, if we could do this for each other and say, when you did this, I saw great things happen. Help educators reestablish the link between their effort and the great things that are happening. I don't know why this happened, where so many people are saying, nothing I'm doing is making a difference. So we all need to reconnect that for one another. Now, you may remember a video, it's been a few years, but there was this video where a principal in Arkansas said to teachers, here's your assignment. I'd like you to pick any student, go up to that student, tell that student they're important, tell them that they matter, tell them they're the reason you come to school, whatever it is. And this principal said, please record this. I want to see how students respond to being told they're important or they're valued or they make a difference. And that was several years ago. I bet 8 years ago, something like that. So a couple of weeks ago, we had an idea here at our school. And we were talking about teachers and their sense of self and agency. And we said, you know what? Our students are saying, you're making a difference. I'm learning from you. But they aren't saying it directly to their teachers. So we got about 100 kids. And we said to them, go to any teacher you want in this building. Tell them they're important. Tell them they matter. Tell them you care about them, whatever. And on the same day, about 100 students went up to educators and said this. And we asked a few of them to video to see how people would respond. So we're going to show you a quick video of teachers, educators learning that they're important.
Okay, so I'm doing this project and I was asked which teachers make me want to come to school today, and you were one of them. So you're one of the reasons I want to come to school every day.
If there was a teacher in this building that like made you want to come to school, like was the reason, they're like, who would it be? And then I was like, Wilder. Oh, don't make me cry.
I decided, hey, Captain Swift always has a really good go-get-em attitude, the classic, the kid up, shut up, get it done. So I thought, hey, why not you know?
I just wanted to let you know that your class and you as yourself are the reason why I like coming to school every day. Yeah, it's my favorite subject and you teach it so well and it just really helps me get through.
Oh yeah?
Of course.
And I chose you. You encouraged me to come to school every morning and be the better me.
Oh my God.
Pick someone, a teacher that makes me want to come to school, and I chose you because I really enjoy your class. And for all my teachers, I chose you.
Aw, thank you, Carlo.
And I was told to pick a teacher that I like showing up to their classes, and like I like that teacher a lot. And I picked you.
Missy, I want to tell you something.
Okay.
You motivate me to come to school every day.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, Crystal.
Yeah.
I would have to pick you, and I just wanted to tell you that you're a really amazing teacher. I appreciate you and all of your teachings, and I just want to tell you to keep on being amazing and inspire other students the way that you inspire me.
So they asked us to pick a teacher that makes us want to come to school every day. And both of us said it was
Man.
Yeah, we were literally fighting over it, so.
Oh man, I appreciate that, y'all.
I'm supposed to be, for this project, taking photos of things that matter to me, and you're the reason I come to school every day.
That means a lot to me. Oh my gosh.
I'm shaking.
Thank you. That you have no idea how much it means to me. I'll never forget this moment.
So we give this to you as one example of something you might do. There are many other things you could do, but maybe your colleagues who are working so hard and covering classes and all the things we're doing and revolving door and trying to catch kids up, maybe they just need to hear the students notice it. They appreciate it and they care about us. And I will find the link to this video. It's going up on our YouTube channel. But you are important, you matter, you make a difference. And I hope your students come up and say it to you.
And we have the power to be able to do that for others as well. Let's recommit to making someone else's day. Let's recommit to using a simple frame like this. When you did blank, then blank occurred. When you modeled your thinking, your students were able to try on examples and figure out how to resolve those problems. When you established routines for those collaborative conversations, you didn't have to devote as much time to giving them directions. They knew what to do. Let's make a commitment to be able to do this for one another. And by the way, to begin to talk to yourself in this way as well. That when you do these seemingly small things that are not that small at all, they make a profound difference. And we can also turn this in the other direction too, to students. We can use that same frame. When you did blank, then blank occurred, to build their agency. When you got stuck on that word problem, you paused and you wrote down all the things that you did know it was asking. That's what got you started again. I saw that you went back to your graphic organizer to check to see if you missed any evidence. Boy, that really strengthened your essay. Let's make a commitment to rebuild the agency of one another, to rebuild the agency of students. Student agency is an essential part of being able to thrive in 2022. And sometimes it's just that meaningful conversation that all of you have, that relational trust that you have built with young people. 5 minutes can change the life of a student. We're going to take a look at 5 minutes. 5 minutes of a teacher talking to one of her 4th grade students. And just to set this up, we had asked teachers to talk with their students about what it was that was unexpected in terms of their learning as they ended the school year last year. And one student in this class said that it was unexpected that she learned how to read. In 3rd grade, she was not a reader. In 4th grade, she learned how to read. And she said some very nice things about her teacher. And her teacher sat on that for a couple of days over the weekend and then circled back around to her student Esmeralda to continue that conversation. Let's take a listen.
Good morning, Esmeralda. Thank you for hanging out with me during break. I just wanted to talk to you about something that was on my mind. Last week, if you remember, we talked about unexpected learnings, and you talked a lot about things that you learned that you didn't expect to learn, which was kind of cool. You talked about new technology, like learning how to copy and paste. And you also talked about that you didn't expect to learn how to read this year. And you said that I taught you how to read. And, you know, that made me feel all nice and warm and fuzzy. But over the weekend, it was really stuck in my mind that I might have taught you some skills and strategies, but you're the one who did all of the work. So when it came to us setting goals together, you met all of your goals. You started off with all your letter sounds, your short vowel sounds, blending those together, learning how to retell a story. And then you got harder goals like digraphs and going back into the text to find answers to questions, all the way to the goals that you're at now, which is your long vowel patterns and using information that you already know to help you learn a new topic. All of these goals you were able to master, and it wasn't me who did the work, it was you. So I want you to think about, how were you able to make your goals? So can you think of something that you did that helped you reach your goals?
What helped me reach my goal was I wanted to make my parents proud, so I kept trying and I didn't give up.
Absolutely, Esmeralda. You had lots of perseverance. You definitely did not give up. And over the weekend, I really thought a lot about all the different things that you did to make your goals. So I have some more for you that I want to talk to you about. So one of the things that I thought of was that, you know, you came to all of your small group meetings. You didn't miss any. So that was really awesome, because how can you practice and learn if you're not in the group? And you always showed up. Another thing that I know that you did is there's so many times where there were after school tutoring hours and you came for extra help, or if you had any questions. Also, Esmeralda, in the small group time, you were constantly participating. You were volunteering to read, you were sounding out the words, you were rereading the sentence if it didn't sound smooth or if it didn't make sense. And so you were fully participating in your small group lessons. Also, you completed all of your assigned work, like everything. You turned in everything. And every article I gave you, every story that I gave you, you read. And so that was all you. You were reaching your goals because you were doing that work. Also, you know, sometimes we talk about how we're learning something, but our brain wanders off for a little bit and we have to refocus our brain. And we've practiced that, and you're really great at that. Another one of my favorites, Esmeralda, is you make mistakes. And isn't that the most awesome thing? When we make mistakes, we always learn something new. So that's another thing that you did to become successful. And then, you know, one of my favorite things always is that you ask questions. Anytime you didn't understand something, you asked me to explain it again to you. So all of these things, Esmeralda, are things that you did, that you were in control of reaching all of your goals this year. So I want to thank you so much for saying that it was me, but really it was totally you. What do you think about that?
I think that I thought I wasn't doing anything, but you were just like teaching me. And now that you said what I did, now I'm like hearing what I did, what I learned.
Yeah, that's awesome, Esmeralda. And all of these things that you're doing, if you continue to do them, are you going to reach your next goals? Yeah, we'll work together as a team. I'll do my part doing the teaching, and then you do all of this stuff, all of the hard work that you've been doing, and then you'll reach your goals. So I'm super proud of you for all your hard work, Esmeralda. Thank you for coming in to talk to me.
5 minutes really can change the life of a young person. Spending a few minutes talking with colleagues about what it is that they do can change their life as well. Let's make a commitment that if we're going to persevere and thrive in 2022, that we commit ourselves to building each other's agency and building our students' agency as well. Now, it's important to note that students have cognitive challenges to their learning. There are barriers that get in the way. And we often think about these and consider these in a behavioral sort of way, really perceiving them as being a behavioral challenge, when in fact, there might be something else that's going on. This is really, in many ways, kind of at the heart of what restorative practices are all about as well, that sometimes that outward behavior that we're seeing may not, in fact, truly represent what it is that's going on internally for that student, cognitively or emotionally as well. Now, we've done a lot of work in partnership with Amy Berry and John Hattie on understanding what it truly means to be engagement. Amy Berry's research was around looking at how it is that teachers view and understand their students' investment in their own engagement. And right there in the center of that is this, this idea of being kind of passive, just sort of being there in the room. And it can be a little bit more on the engagement side or a little bit more on the disengagement side. Maybe they're doing work and paying attention and responding to questions. Maybe they're starting to withdraw a little bit and become distracted or be a little bit separated from the group. And what these teachers really talked about is that engagement, true engagement, is around that active participation, investing and driving one's own learning. And that disengagement can also move from passive to more active kinds of disengagement. Lots of teachers around the country and around the world embraced this idea and talked with their own students about what engagement truly means, introducing them to this idea of your levels of engagement and understanding your own investment in this. And in many cases, co-constructed with their students what it is that varying levels of engagement and disengagement would look like. All the way over there on the left-hand side, that disruptive disengagement that's going on, very active, right? Distracting others, disrupting the learning that's happening. At the time with this teacher, they were in remote learning. And so the students define things like, well, hey, when you're unmuting your mic and just saying something that's random or off topic, or making a joke during the learning, actively disrupting. Avoiding a little bit less active, but still looking for ways to be able to get out of work, engaging in what many of us see as being some of those off-task kinds of behavior. At the withdrawing level, these same students talked about what does it mean when you say you're distracted? And they noted these students, elementary students noted, you know, it's like when you're thinking about Fortnite, when you're supposed to be thinking about what's going on in class, right? Outwardly, they look maybe like they're kind of paying attention, but cognitively, they're not really with you. And then over there on the engagement side, relatively passive levels of engagement. They're doing the work, they're paying attention. Sometimes we refer to these as the teacher-pleasing behaviors, but there's still a level of passivity that's involved in that. Here's what we're really interested in helping students to elevate their own investment in learning by, in fact, investing in their learning, not just answering questions, but asking questions, understanding that what it is that you're learning is relevant and important. And at those highest levels of active learning that's going on, that students are driving their own learning. They're setting goals for themselves. They're seeking feedback. They're self-assessing. They're engaging in all of that. And one of the things I think that is critical to really be able to note is that when it comes to investing and driving their learning, those more active ways of doing so, it's up to us as teachers to be able to create the opportunities for students to do so. If we teach at a level that really just rewards students for sort of being passive in terms of their learning, then that's exactly what it is that we'll get. If we want them to truly engage and be empowered by their learning, then we have to create those opportunities for students to invest and drive in their learning. Now, as I said, lots of teachers in different places around the world have embraced this and had conversations with their students. We're going to take a look at 10th grade world history teacher, Thomas Tutogi, as he talks with his students about what it is that varying levels of engagement and disengagement look like. And just to kind of set up the activity for this, what Mr. Tutogi presented to students was some brief descriptors of each of these, and then students broke into groups and discussed what each of these might look like, and then reformed groups using a jigsaw approach to talk about how they would define their learning. Let's take a listen.
I'm like, you know what? When you walk out of a classroom, when you end the day, you're like, hey, where was I today? So today we're gonna be learning about 3 things: disrupting, avoiding, withdrawing, participating, investing, and driving, right? All within the classroom, okay? So here's what we got. I'm gonna take us through kind of this, like a jigsaw, and I want us to get to a point where we can just kind of self-assess ourselves.
What do you think?
Right?
Okay, so when I think of disrupting, I think of obnoxious behavior that might disrupt our learning.
What kind of obnoxious behavior?
So like, kind of like what Hayden did earlier, when you like tap somebody and you're like, and you keep tapping them, but they don't want to be bothered because they're learning.
Like, give me an example. Have you ever seen disrupting in a classroom? Like, give me some personal experience.
When a kid randomly starts like throwing things, or randomly just starts like acting up for no reason, or like do something that would get everybody's attention,
100%.
so that oh, I'm doing this and I'm doing that, so it can just disrupt everybody and mess up everything.
When you lose interest, what happens?
You like start to doze off and you're like thinking about something else.
Daydreaming.
Yeah.
Or you probably just go to sleep in class.
Go to sleep in class. Cell phone's probably another huge one. Good. What do you think the difference is between avoiding and withdrawing?
Avoiding for me is like purposely avoiding, losing interest.
Yeah.
It's just like I don't feel like doing it.
Right.
Investing looks like participating.
Actively participating.
Actively
Raising your hand.
participating.
Taking notes. Good notes. Feeling like what you're learning is important. Why is that like vital?
Because then they'll be interested too.
Good. And not only interested, but like you'll be more engaged. You'll be like.
You'll enjoy it more.
One more time.
You'll enjoy more.
You'll enjoy it more. Good. What else? Right. So according to what we see here, driving is setting goals, seeking feedback, driving your learning, and tracking your progress. Right. How would you do that? How can you ensure that you're driving your learning?
By doing the most you can to learn.
Good. Well, doing the most you can to learn, but like, what does that look like? Does that look like contacting your teachers?
Yeah. Making
Right?
sure everything is turned on time, making sure
Checking in when you don't remember.
Checking in. What about when you're absent?
being prepared. Emailing your teacher
Being prepared, catching up. Good. And how do we do that here?
by doing what you need to do. What needs to be
Yeah,
done.
but like when you're absent, where would I tell you to go?
To Canvas.
Canvas, right? Everything's on Canvas, right? Right. And then the last one that we talked about was like self-assessing. What is that? What does self-assessing mean?
Where you're at, like as a
Seeing where you're at.
as a learner, how much you know.
Perfect. That doesn't have to be like a test, right? That can be you just kind of reflecting, just taking a step back.
How well do I know this? What do I need to learn?
Perfect. Well, we're going to go back to our home group. So you're going to go back to the table you first started at. When you get there, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to talk and discuss with our table group everything that we found out, everything that we learned.
Avoiding, is that like doing like the total opposite of what you're supposed to be doing?
I think the
Meaning,
like you're avoiding any kind of work. Like avoiding what you're
so like the falling in line off task. We talked about basically driving, like it can fall in the line with pushing yourself to do better in the classroom, not only a classroom setting, but a learning setting, anywhere you can really learn. So yeah, so for example,
What did you guys do?
a big one for me was the success criteria and time management. I feel like time management is a big one because you should make time to do what you're supposed to do, and you shouldn't really feel comfortable turning in your work like late just because you have the option to. Like you shouldn't set yourself to do that. That's like it could set yourself up for failure because of the simple fact that you turning in work, like say for instance like a month later and stuff, you're falling back on a lot of things. So time management is really a big one for me. Time management and the success criteria, because if you could leave the classroom knowing that you accomplished and you can put a check by the success criteria, that's a big one.
This entire lesson took Mr. Totogi not even 30 minutes to be able to do, but it built a foundation for him and his students to be able to refer back to their investments in their own engagement, in their own learning. But we also know too that at times students have difficulty with that and they disengage.
And every day in the class you just watched, in Thomas's class, students set their intention for their engagement. And then at the exit slip, they reflect on their engagement. Where did they meet their learning intention for that level of engagement? But as Nancy said, there are times that students disengage. And that's a reality. And I'll tell you, this year, it's really frustrating people. It's becoming very frustrating that the student's not engaged. And they're talking about, like, all I'm reading is the crisis of engagement. So this article came out. The authors argue there are 9 cognitive challenges to learning. Nancy and I created a table of this and did a quick review in our Ed Leadership column. Nancy might be able to find the link to this short article if you're interested in it as I'm talking. So what these authors argue, there are 9 different reasons. So I'm going to explain the 9 reasons, and then I'm going to share with you what some teachers in San Diego decided to do about it. The interesting thing is, I'm going to give you 3, and your teams could have this conversation and say, if we diagnose a student that is disengaged because of mental mindset, what would we do about it? So here they are. 9, the first one is mental mindset. Now in the article, the research review, there are lots of mindsets. You know, there are students who show up in mathematics saying, I'm going to fail math. I can't learn math. Math doesn't like me. The one I chose, though, is that the content's not relevant. Students have a mindset, I don't need to learn this, and therefore they disengage. So for example, what could we do about this? Here are a few ideas from teachers in San Diego. We might focus on and talk about the importance and the value of this particular learning. Why is it relevant? We could work to increase students' ownership, and we could do lessons where we directly teach students about mindsets and how mindsets can interfere with learning. The second cognitive challenge, barrier, reasons for disengagement, relates to metacognition and self-regulation. Thinking about our thinking, summarizing, predicting, monitoring, setting goals, all those self-regulation and metacognition behaviors. And the one I chose, because there are many, is when a student is overconfident about what they've already understood. Now, I would like to point out, this is not limited to minors. If you've ever tried to lead a professional learning session with grown-ups and there's someone in there who doesn't think the content's relevant, check their behavior. So the teachers here said, Do we create reflection assignments? Do we teach students about planning, monitoring, and adjusting learning? Do we give them practice tests so they can see what they know and what they don't yet know? The third area is around fear and mistrust. That the students operating in fear. That could be bullying. That could be trauma. But the one I chose is that the student has interpreted the teacher's behavior as being unfair or unsupportive. I didn't say the teacher's behavior is unfair or unsupportive, but that student is interpreting it that way. And if the affective filter of fear and mistrust goes up, learning goes down and they can disengage. So what do we do about it? Do we focus on our teacher credibility? And by that, I mean, do students trust you? And do they think they can learn from you? That's credibility. Do we restructure our feedback? There is evidence out there that says some students interpret teacher feedback as data that the teacher doesn't like them. The teacher's working really hard trying to give good feedback, and the student says, see, this teacher doesn't like me. And then do we create a safe environment for making mistakes and learning to occur? The fourth one is around insufficient prior knowledge. And I think we're all talking about this now. How much unfinished learning do students have? And what gaps are there that we have to address this year? And if we're going to talk about this, and if we're going to say there is unfinished learning and they have learning gaps, we have to think about what we can do about it. Do we, for example, give initial assessments? And do we specifically and intentionally look to see what do students already know? Do we provide them lessons and background knowledge? Do we actually say, this is really important from last year? Our colleague John Elmerod always says, there's a difference between stuff you need to know and stuff that would be neat to know. And so when we assess, is this really critical background, prior knowledge? Do we use our interactive videos to build their content knowledge, their background knowledge, their conceptual knowledge? Number 5 is misconceptions. Common misconceptions that we all cling to that interfere with our learning. They are cognitive challenges and cause disengagement. So what do we do about that? Do we use advanced organizers? They have been around for over 50 years. They help us unearth misconceptions. Do we know what the common misconceptions are for kindergartners or learning algebra? And do we have students justify their responses so we can see their thinking? So I've only given you 5, there are 9. My point is, if we got really good at these and we said, the reason I think this student is disengaged is, then we can take action and we're less frustrated. We spent 3 months of Friday professional learning sessions just focused on these 9. We wanted to get really, really good at helping teachers say, the reason I believe this learner has disengaged is this, and there are things I can do about it. Number 6, my favorite on the list to talk about, ineffective learning strategies. The student has the strategies, but they aren't working. One way to know that is the student got started on a task, but then quit. They had an approach, it just didn't work, and they quit. Sometimes students prefer the least effective learning strategies. So if we think that students are trying a strategy, they try something on and it's not working for them, they realize it and they quit, do we think about teaching study skills? Have we actually taught our learners to study? Do we model effective strategies with our Think Aloud? Do they get to see how these learning strategies work and hear the thinking behind them? And do we give them practice, spaced practice, to develop this new strategy over time? Not just, here's a new strategy today, tomorrow there's a new one, the next day there's a new one, the next day there's a new one. Number 7, I think, is the hardest one on the list to address. Transfer of learning. The student has the concept or skill, but doesn't know how to use it. And teaching them that concept or skill again is not going to help. They don't know yet how to transfer and generalize. So what do? This one was the hardest for us. I'm not sure we're 100% on this one. We're really working on this to teach to the point of transfer. If we're worrying about transfer, did we plan tasks that require near and far transfer? Did we model the concept, skill, strategy in different contexts, or do we only give them one example? And do we include feedback about how they are processing the tasks, not just whether or not they got it correct? Number 8, the myth of multitasking, the constraints of selective attention. We all think we are the exception to the research, that we are the one who can multitask. It's not true. We can rapidly shift our attention, but some things require deep focus and sustained attention. I think pandemic teaching made this a little worse. There's a lot of students who saw the adults in their lives, quote, multitask, their parents and whatever, and they thought they could do it. And so now they're used to pulling out their phones. They're used to looking at Fortnite or whatever. And so we have to teach them about how to pay attention, how to focus. And if we do that, we can do that through our teacher clarity. Here's what we're learning today. Here's why we're learning it. Do we use breaks? Like we have technology breaks at our school. We have a time in every class where there's a tech break and they can update and check and snap and everything else they want to do. Do we have reorientation strategies where we bring them back to learning? And do we have lessons that we directly teach students about multitasking, that it interferes with learning? Last one, number 9, the constraints of mental effort and working memory, also known as cognitive load theory. The student is trying too hard to concentrate or focus on too much information. And we've all experienced cognitive load. We all have experienced that. We all know what it feels like when there's no more getting in. In fact, if we keep pushing, when we reach cognitive load, we get diminished returns. So what do we do about it? Do we actually organize information? Do we really think about how to organize the information into chunks to reduce the demand on working memory? Do we use visual and auditory cues together, known as dual coding theory? Do we use retrieval practice? More than 100 years of research on retrieval practice. Forgetting, memory curves, over 100 years. Are we actually having students retrieve the information from their brain over and over again? Because if we do, we are likely to reduce the demand on working memory. The whole idea here, the whole point of my talking about this is that we can learn to identify why students are disengaged and then come up with ideas with our teams about what actions we can take to re-engage our learners.
And that's a critical and fundamental part of restorative practices as well. Kids don't wake up and say, I think I'll ruin her day today. There's often something that's in the way. We want to make sure that we're getting to that. Now, another dimension of really being able to thrive in 2022 includes making sure that we're amplifying what that engagement looks like with some empathetic feedback. As Doug noted earlier, some students wrongly believe that feedback from the teacher is evidence that the teacher doesn't like them. So that's great feedback. Sorry for the pun. That's great feedback for us about what's working and what's not working. Now, many of you are familiar with some of the research about feedback. We know that feedback is one of those influences that has a higher than average potential to be able to accelerate student learning along the way. But I think this is one of those misconceptions that's out there, that it is wrongly interpreted as being the amount of feedback given, when in fact, what this really reflects is when feedback is received by the learner. It's not that you need to double down on the amount of feedback given, but rather to pay close attention to whether it is that the feedback that is received by the student is acted upon. And something that we know about feedback is that acceptance of that feedback is moderated by the relationship between the two people. Whether we're talking about two adults giving feedback to one another, or we're talking about a student and a teacher with feedback. When there isn't a good relationship there, we tend to get immune to that feedback. I imagine all of us have examples in our own lives where we received feedback from someone and either we didn't feel that it was a strong and trusting relationship, or we didn't think that that person possessed the knowledge that was needed in order to give so. And so we dismissed it. That feedback perhaps was correct, but we didn't listen to that because of that relationship between us and somebody else. Feedback is an essential part of what it is that we can do to build not only the academic skills of students, but also their social and emotional skills, building that agency, building that relational trust that is so important between teacher and student. And when we have these opportunities to be able to provide that feedback, we want to be able to utilize feedback with a great framework. And this great framework is empathetic feedback. Now, Michelle Trujillo has written a lot about empathetic feedback, and she defines it as that authentic quest for understanding. And you'll notice it goes in both directions. It's not just feedback that is given, it is feedback received. There's a reciprocity to all of this feedback that happens. We refer to great feedback. It's a little way of being able to remember what it is that you want to include in that feedback. That feedback should be growth oriented. For example, here's what you can do, and perhaps it's around what you're going to continue doing or stop doing or start doing. It's also real. There's an authenticity there that is offered in that feedback. That it is empathetic, that important pronoun we. This is something we can work on together. That it's asked for. In particular, that we listen closely to what it is that the feedback that is needed, and that it's timely as well. We know that feedback gets stale pretty quickly. So we want to make sure that we're providing that kind of great feedback. Let's make sure that we're using growth-oriented, empathetic feedback to build agency, to build skill, whether we're talking about our colleagues, whether we're talking about our students. How is it that we can use what we have in order to be able to build the agency and the skills of our students? Now, here's our last reminder. And it's a reminder that we have included for the last 2 years, because one of the learnings I believe that all of us have had in the last 2 years is how very important it is that you invest in yourself. That investment in yourself is a critical part of how it is that you attain those higher levels of agency, those higher levels of self-efficacy. The responses that all of us are feeling at different times, feeling discouraged at times, feeling, do my efforts really matter in all of this? Please know that those responses that you have are normal responses to an abnormal situation. We have been through a time and continue to advance through a time where there's no rule book. We don't know what it is that's going to happen next. We're all looking to be able to find balance in this unsteady year, this unexpected year that we didn't think that we were going to have 6 months ago. Well, here it is. There was an article recently that was entitled Efficacy in the Face of Adversity. And these two researchers looked at the efficacy of teachers during the past school year, during the 2020-2021 school year in particular. You remember that year, right? What they were looking at and researching about was how it is that teachers felt a level of efficacy or not in their current work. They interviewed several hundred teachers. Now, as a reminder, self-efficacy is one of those influences that has a very high potential to be able to accelerate learning. And efficacy, self-efficacy, is our individual beliefs that we can reach our goals. That self-efficacy is needed and necessary for adults as well as for young people. What they were interested in looking at was what they termed crisis efficacy. During a time when we've all had to change our practices and pivot very quickly to respond to a crisis, how is our efficacy being challenged? And what they noted, as many have noted in the past as well, is that efficacy is so important because you can't pour from an empty cup. You can't possibly feed others if you're not able to also feed yourself as well. So they talked with all of these teachers about their sense of efficacy. And what they found was surprising. They found that nearly 70% of the variance of these teachers' sense of efficacy was accounted for by their relative well-being, their investment in their own well-being. And here were their recommendations that those most efficacious teachers felt during this time of crisis. They said the first thing to remember is that you have to model vulnerability. We are looked up to by students, by our colleagues, by families, by communities. And we need to model what our vulnerability is as well. Brene Brown reminds us that it is a birthplace of love, belonging, courage, empathy, and creativity. When we model our own vulnerability, we make it possible for others to be able to ask for help as well. Their second recommendation from these most efficacious of teachers was to continue to emphasize a balance in life. And that includes things like checking in on your own emotions, making sure you have those little micro inspections, because those improve your overall well-being. Maintain your sleep hygiene. A number of teachers mentioned how important that was for their well-being. The Sleep Foundation recommends 7 to 9 hours a night for people in our collective age group. Make sure you have that personal wellness plan that includes healthy eating or good sleep hygiene, exercise, and importantly, communication outside of work as well. Now, you've heard all of these things before. These are not new. But here was the big finding from those researchers, a surprising finding around what it takes to be able to maintain one's well-being as an educator right now. And these most efficacious teachers said, you've got to create meaningful gatherings. As Doug noted earlier, attempts by well-meaning school districts to eliminate some of the gatherings that we have not resulted in the kinds of well-being that we had hoped for. We are a meaningful gathering. We need, as educators, to be able to come around the campfire and to be able to share our stories, to be able to share our challenges, importantly, to be able to share our successes as well. We are a meaningful gathering. We can't control all the storms we face, but we can focus on the elements that we do influence. Because, and I love this quote, Doug loves this quote, we are at our finest when we take care of each other.
I worry that all the messages about take care of yourself, which are important and should occur, might make some educators feel guilt when they don't have the time, when they don't make a decision that's in the health interest, and then they feel guilt. And it's one more thing to do, and I failed at that too. And so yes, when the pandemic started and we kept saying, take care of yourself, get through this, we need you. Now I want to change it. We need to take care of each other. We need to give a couple minutes to our colleagues and get those minutes from our colleagues. Too many people are leaving this profession, and we need you. Don't quit. Reach out to colleagues, build a community of care, because collectively we can do this. Yeah, exactly. And I just saw that, feeling guilty for taking a day off. I know. And we have got to take care of each other. Thank you all for your time. Back to you, Dina.
Great. Thank you. Really big thank you to Doug and Nancy for this really engaging presentation with such great information that will hopefully inspire all of us. So again, thank you to each of you for joining us today. And thank you to our presenters for graciously giving your time today. And wish all of you a super enjoyable week and a thriving next week. Thank you so much.